We are here to answer your questions about classic minis, about life, about anything. I think we're going to have a really good time tonight.
I always try and say, don't I, that my channel is about getting rid of the black art of working on minis.
For me, getting into minis, it was I had a newer mini. 2007 was one of the BMW minis. It was a Cooper S, and I found out about classics. I'm like, you know what? That's what I want. That's what I want.
There you are now. Hello, everybody.
Amazing.
How did I get into minis? It's something that just kind of happened from just one really good friend of mine asked me to build them, and I said, yeah, I'm doing nothing this weekend. I'll do that.
Man, it's funny how quickly things can change.
It's awesome to have so much really good fun chat with you all. And
yep, that's the best part. I'd really like to make this a regular thing.
thank you to everybody again, and thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone, and you know the drill. Enjoy those minis.
See you guys on the next one.
Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome to the next episode. Oh man,
I see some comments coming in already. Hello, all you lovely people.
Got some stuff from Jamie, Max, Turbo Phil, Team Ballylock Classics, Hi Mom, and Classic Mini Projects USA.
Hello, the Gentries in Nocha. Hello there. I hope you're having a wonderful time.
Well, they're exploring the show and having their own vacation right now.
Ah, what a wonderful place to go visit.
Yeah, I'd love to make it up there north sometime. I'd really just like to go to Canada or anywhere in north of the U.S. I feel like it would be really, really pretty. Different from my experience down here. Where at?
Yeah. Go and see the Canucka stands.
Canucka stands. I've never heard that term before. Oh my god!
I watched a channel by a guy called AVE, which is something. What's his name? It's versus something versus Arduinos. I can't remember. Somebody in the comments might remember. But he's a Vancouverian kind of an engineer guy. He started his channel doing tool reviews, and now he just talks gibberish and has the crack. But
nice.
Yeah, I like watching his videos, but he comes out with lots of those. He calls himself a Canucka stan. Well, actually, where it came from was he was trying to describe the money, and he called them Canadian kopecks from Canuckistan.
I'm pretty sure that, thinking about it, I'm fairly certain their currency is just called the Canadian dollar. I'm not really sure though. But that's a great
dollar. Yeah, Canadian kopek from Kazakhstan. I think he was making light of the fact it wasn't worth as much as an American dollar, but anyway.
Yeah. I think theirs are similar to the pound right now. I think, which is maybe a little better. I don't know. It depends on where you're buying something from, which direction.
Yeah. I don't know. My currency, stock market abilities are poor.
That's why we work on minis, not in the financial markets.
Yeah. Anybody who it takes me so long to invoice anybody, my financial savvy, not good. No.
Oh man.
But anyway,
well, what's going on in your life these days? How are you doing over there?
Well, we're busy. Yeah, it's one of those times of the year, when everything is getting busy. Loads of people are anxious to get projects started and making bookings for next year, and yeah.
Yep. Weather's starting to get cold. People not driving as much.
Yeah. Show season ending too, right? Race season's ending, show season's ending, which involves stressing me out. But anyway, that's all right.
Their stress is your stress. The joys of a race mechanic.
Yes. Yeah, well, I actually have been doing a load of work on my own Volkswagen Touareg, I think is probably the correct pronunciation. we're doing a top end rebuild, taking the engine out and doing a top end rebuild. But I was just chatting to him. He was laughing. He said, "It's funny, isn't it? Like, people drop their problems off to you and you sort it out, which, whatever, their mini or whatever it is." He says, "But then when you have problems, you have to drop it off to yourself and sort it out."
You just drive, you drive out of your garage around the block, and then you bring it back into your garage, and you just talk to yourself
No,
for
I
a
ring.
while.
No, I ring myself first and book it in.
Oh, okay.
I send myself
Yeah.
a strongly worded email.
Yeah. Your partner's like, why
About the last
am I with this guy? I need to get out of here. It's going crazy.
Yeah. No, I send myself a strongly worded email. But anyway, right. Yeah. Oh, look, the viewer. Oh, look, people are listening. Oh,
how strange.
Oh, I can't understand why. Who doesn't want this joy? Yeah.
Oh,
well, hey ho. What about you? How's good old Yankee land?
It's pretty good. Weather is starting to get nice here, so it's like the beginning of autumn or fall, and it's finally the heat starting to break, and each day is just like it's nice to be outside. What I call it is the beginning of one of the 2 mini driving seasons of a year, but of course my mini isn't driving. How's that always work out?
Like,
I swear.
Many driving times of the year. I was going to say of your time, but
Oh yeah. Oh, ouch. Cuts deep.
I don't have a working mini, so I'm not.
The two of us, like, in fact, teaching people to work on minis, but don't have one working ourselves.
Preaching here, we're not one of us one going. We actually did this. Myself and a friend of mine did this the other day, and we do this generally to just make ourselves feel better. But we went through 20 people that we knew, close to us that had minis, and tried to figure out how many of them had working minis. I think we'd 5.
Oh, God.
Had 5
out of 20. Oh my
out of
God.
20. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
so.
Well, hopefully that'll
average is good. Average is good. Hey, look, if we were into,
yeah,
yeah, it'll change a week. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, for a week, and then I'll be like, "Why is my oil pressure low? Why is my exhaust so hot? Are my brake lines melting?"
Noise. Actually, one quick funny one before we get into this. A very good friend of mine rang me today on his way back from a trip. Hope he doesn't mind me. He'll highly tune in, but. He rang me on the way back from a trip down the country, and he said to me, Paul, if your whistling sound car has safe to drive?
The is it safe question, I actually get that a good bit. It's like my mini's making X noise, or my mini is kind of doing this one thing. Is it still safe to drive, or will it explode? It's probably fine.
It's probably going to explode. But sorry, guys, I have a little bit of a connection issue right at the moment, so my apologies to everybody if my video is turned around. I'm going to try and see if I can work on that, see if I can get a better connection.
Well, while you're doing that, I can say hey to a few folks in the chat here. It looks like we've got quite a few people in here. Callum, hello. Pipsqueak the Mini, welcome. Turbo Cooper Sport, good to have you here. It's been a bit since I've seen you in one of the live streams. Capo Carpetta, well, hello. Let's see, Mark Shorak, hello. Hope things are doing well over there in Manchester. Adrian and Dan the Car Guy, hello. So, well, today we are going to be starting to talk about ignition timing, timing the Mini, getting things dialed in, the different types of ignition systems you can use, and kind of all the little odds and ends questions you might have throughout that process. And then, of course, after all of that, we do a fixed Q&A session at the end of this live stream where you guys can ask your questions. We're going to be answering those. And then if you like the chat, if you like the live stream, maybe consider supporting us on Super Chat through YouTube. Super chat questions are guaranteed an answer, and it helps us pay for the streaming software as well as our channel. So we would very much appreciate that as well. How you doing over there, Paul? Think
up now. I bumped us down slightly on quality, but hopefully that'll solve the connection issue for now.
nice. Your video quality actually looks a little bit more consistent now. So I think
yeah,
from my side,
I'm not just 3 pixels now. I'm not doing my version of Minecraft, Ireland Minecraft.
Yeah, you're at least 5 pixels now.
Ah, that's fine. That's fine. That's how I look anyway. If you meet me in the real world, I'm literally just 1 pixel. Yeah, that's all I am. Yeah, I had it installed by the SAS about 12 years ago. It's a fantastic feature. Yeah, it's helped me.
Oh my god.
Yeah. They install it with a sledgehammer.
Well, that's how we do most of the work on the cars, with a sledge. That's why I keep it up there on the wall. You never know when you need it.
As I always say, if it can't be fixed by a big hammer or a vice grip, it's an electrical problem.
Well, seems like a fact to me. There you go. Tech tips from Paul today.
Yeah, I'm trying desperately to reduce my customer load next week. Oh god.
Well,
I'm in a bit of a humor today, guys. Sorry. Well, we see how this goes.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, to get started, we could probably tackle, maybe start off with the standard distributor style minis, and maybe we can kind of talk about a few of those things. For those of you who don't know, a distributor is basically a method for controlling when spark plugs fire and cause combustion in your engine based on the rotation of usually a cam gear or some sort of mechanical driven gear that spins a rotor and then creates contact at electrical contact points. And you can see, Paul, if you want to add anything to that, that was kind of like the 2 cents, but you've got one there.
I'm with you. Yeah. Well, I've got one cap, but the mechanicals are pretty simple in them, right? So yeah, a distributor is exactly as Cole says, just literally a means of getting spark from the coil, or a traditional distributor is getting a spark from the coil to the right piston at the right time, or to the right combustion chamber at the right time, would be probably the right way to say it. And I suppose the one thing that I'm going to start this out with is that I think a lot of people think there's black magic in distributors. I think that or some version of that. So I think I want to try and get rid of as much of that for people today as we possibly can, to try and distill this down to something that's real basic and simple, which is exactly like Cole just said. It's trying to ignite a mixture of fuel and air, which we've gotten into the combustion chamber, and if we ignite it, we can generate some power and we can drive our pistons and make our car go. And you need to think about distributor ignition and distributor systems and timing as that, solely that. It is nothing else. And if we accept that, then the only sort of black magic that I suppose comes into that then afterwards is whether there is, is there power to be made, or whether there is tweaks to be made to improve your car by that, or whether or not, wow, that happened early, Cole. Or whether or not, I suppose, what we do with our ignition is going to actually give us performance, or tangible performance increases, or whether it's going to make our car more reliable, or whether it's going to make our car more fuel efficient. And really, they're kind of, I suppose, they're the 3 major steps that we can talk about. So I suppose if we talk about the most basic form of ignition that exists, if you buy a standard Mini from the, I suppose, 60s through to the 90s, is going to come with a distributor and points-based ignition system. And I suppose in around those, your Mini probably came with, when you bought it, with that particular setup.
Yeah, it was My
points?
Mini actually had an A series from an Austin America in it, but it did have points. It was a very old original distributor, from what I could tell, which ultimately got switched out with electronic ignition inside the distributor, replacing those points, which we can talk about in a little while, I suppose. But yeah, it was a distributor from the factory and from the previous buyer.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I suppose let's talk about the functionality of that, all the different stages then of where we can go. So for the best outlook on a distributor, if you buy a Mini and you're trying to figure out whether the ignition system you have is working or not, or if it's working optimally or not, the three kind of really good, I suppose, indicating factors are how easily does the car start. So if it starts relatively easy, the single greatest load on the ignition system, or where the ignition system is most likely going to falter, is starting a cold engine. Because you draw so much current through the starter motor that you lose the energy in the coil. And if you have an ignition system that's less than in good condition, it will be most nodes starting. And a lot of Minis out there will do this funny thing that people sometimes don't actually recognize as being an ignition problem, but they'll crank their engine to start it, but they'll find it only starts just as they let the key off, and then it'll kind of make a spurt, or it may not start, or it may go again. And that's because you're inducing current in the field windings of the starter motor, which is going back through your coil and giving it an extra little boost, make it go.
Yep. And there's a lot of power being pulled from a starter, for especially older style starters. The later style pre-engaged systems tend to draw a little bit less power. And then the gear reduction style starters also tend to draw less power and produce higher torque for the same amount of power that you're sending to it. But then the earlier inertia style starters tend to be very, very demanding of the electrical system. So assuming that you have a good battery and it's got good voltage and you've got no problems there, you probably are less likely to encounter that kind of scenario, but it can still happen. But as you start to move down in the voltage range, your battery starts to go dead. Those are the kinds of things that are going to start happening, especially on earlier cars.
Totally.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I suppose the second thing is this maybe not so much on your side of the pond, but very definitely on our side. We get a lot of problems with wetting of the ignition. So water coming through, and a Mini is really exposed in this because it keeps its coil sitting right in front of the grill, and it keeps its distributor right in front of the grill. So we get to pressure wash our electrical system, when we drive above 20 miles an hour. So and that's certainly a good indicator.
There's some pretty interesting mods to fix that too. I mean, aside from moving to like an electric style points replacement, but you could there are kind of low tech options of a shield that covers that distributor that helps just keep water off of it. And then in some situations, if you're stuck out somewhere, you don't really have a lot available to work on. If you have just like a plastic bag, a lot of people will wrap their distributors in a plastic bag just to keep the water off of them, to maybe, get yourself home if it's starting to have some sputtering issues and things like that. Some pretty low tech ways.
A rubber glove, believe it or not, is an absolutely wonderful piece of kit for it. One of those nitrile rubber gloves, because you've got five wires.
If you get the black ones, it'll look cool.
It'll look really cool.
Slide it right over.
Yeah, and then you cut the tips off the fingers and put all your leads through it, and cable tie your leads onto the little finger ends, and you've got like a perfect
little noodles coming out.
Job. Yeah.
Oh,
100 years ago, the Marigold, I don't know, you guys probably have those as well. The yellow dish washing gloves, the very popular ones here anyway. Were they were the glove of choice if you had your 850 was thinking hard of running on the motorway.
Oh, they had perfect finger distribution.
Oh, they were just so
things would
perfect.
come out
Yeah,
nicely.
and that yellow, you wouldn't believe
Oof.
in Ireland, especially, you'd see the yellow glove through the grill. You see that yellow
That's funny.
glove through the grill. But yeah, I even some of the I remember the 998 Coopers actually had a factory one you could buy that was like a kind of an elastomeric cover that went over the distributor and also over the coil. And
it was kind of like a rubbery, plasticky kind of material, right?
Yeah, kind of shiny on the outside. It wasn't. I don't think it was OE. I don't think they necessarily fitted it from the get-go, but you get it. Or maybe on the Coopers they did fit it OE. I'm not 100% sure on that. Hopefully maybe somebody who has a bit more. If Ian Campbell is still tuned in, he might well know. He's the kind of guy that know about those things. He's our resident anorak.
Those so distributors kind of moving into, we mentioned electronic conversion kits, and so these are very, very simple kits. You can get them for basically every style of distributor that was on the Mini. You just got to know the model number. And they replace your points, which is a small a piece of metal that is making contact to or lifting and kind of tapping as your distributor spinning around to create contact and then create that time of spark, when that needs to happen. And that's one of the biggest points of kind of heartburn, failure, issues that people run into with unreliability of distributors. And that can be replaced with something that uses, Paul has it right there. That is a standard point style. And the contacts are the two that are underneath his index finger there. And then you can actually replace that unit 1-for-1 with a magnetic style electric unit, I guess is the best way to call it. And that's it right there. And so with that, you can change it out and remove that element of failure, and then you don't end up having to deal with a lot of the wet driving situations that we were just kind of discussing. So those kits are very, very popular. I would encourage you, if you want something to add some very easy reliability to your Mini, to pick one of those up. And you don't necessarily need to buy the most expensive one that's out there. There are nice ones. There are ones that are priced, and then you can check on eBay. You can find some really good affordable ones that get the job done very well. And it's very unlikely that you have any problems with them.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the great advantages of those electronic points replacement kit is also the fact that they give a very clean brake, which means you can get a much higher energy spark as well. For an engine that is starting to burn a little bit of oil, which Mini's very good at, as soon as you start burning oil, you drastically change your octane value, and having an electronic much higher energy spark ignite the fuel and air much more readily and give you just much better performance generally. I get a lot of cars that struggle with meeting emissions standards, the go through for their test and emissions test. But one of the places we can often get great advantages on emissions is changing to something like one of those electric igniters, because you get a much more complete combustion, and that immediately reduces how much hydrocarbons go back out the exhaust, and you get a better, more efficient Mini.
That is very true. That's a very good point. And so with distributors, a lot of people, I think the black magic that you were talking about earlier in the episode is around getting that initial tune, getting the initial timing set, and then how to set timing in general. Which feels like, to someone who hasn't done this before, can feel very, very confusing. But maybe I'll start with some of the early basics. So when you're putting your distributor in, and then maybe you can round out the end with some additional tidbits and maybe some base settings.
Cool.
When you are installing a distributor, say you have just built up an engine, or maybe you have an old distributor, you've taken it out. Inside the hole where the distributor goes in your block, you have something called a distributor drive gear. They're a little bit different between the A series and then the A plus engines. But there is in the Haynes manual a spec that kind of encourages you to put that gear in. It kind of slots into place. As you can see, I'm turning here. It turns as it gets placed in place, and then there is an offset and a line, and that line actually gets pointed towards your number one piston, the one that is closest to your radiator. And that is one of the first places that people will kind of run into issues, because that tooth being off one way or the other can cause some heartburn. You can technically tune in time and engine even with those teeth off, but it might limit your ability to rotate the distributor. And then once you have that drive gear in, your distributor slots in, and then your rotor on the distributor should be pointing towards the number one cylinder. And there's some additional information around that, with like the engine needing to be at top dead center, and on the compression stroke specifically, and all that, which can complicate things. But realistically, your engine is at top dead center 2 times, once on the compression stroke and once on the exhaust. And so that is kind of the first portion of putting a distributor in your car, and where a lot of people will, without that foundation, not be able to get the engine in tune because that is out of whack. And then once that's done, you are now in the process. You do need a timing light. It's very, very recommended. But then you move into the process of actually timing the engine. And maybe, hopefully I didn't miss anything there, Paul. Did you see anything that I missed?
Yeah, no, I totally. I'll give you a trick is all I'll do. I learned this many, many years ago, and I still use it every single time I time any engine at all. And it works really well with a Mini, especially, is if you are trying to find that sweet spot of where the distributor should go in, as you quite right, but you want to start off with the rotor arm pointing on the cap that you've chosen to be number one. And on a Mini, that's kind of pointing between the alternator and the number one plug. That's kind of where it is, that little spot there. Now, that's not to say that is where it has to be. You can choose any of the 4 that you wish, but that's kind of the factory standard. And if you've got a vacuum advance, and it can hit the starter motor and stuff, so that kind of gets all of that. But finding whether your engine's on its compression stroke and is the piston at top dead center. Sometimes Minis don't have a very good mark for this down on the flywheel, or sorry, down on the pulley at the front where the fan belt is driven from. And a trick that I have used for years and years and years, and for anybody who is learning this for the first time, this will help you greatly, is to pop off the rocker cover and to physically turn the engine over. And the easiest way to do that is get your Mini on nice level flat ground and put it in 3rd or 4th gear, and pull it forward towards yourself as you go. What you will do then is you will turn your engine and you watch all of the rocker arms going up and down. And what you're aiming for is to have the 2 rocker arms over piston number 1 in the upmost position, and the 2 rocker arms on piston number 4, that'll be rocker arm 7 and 8, one going down and one coming up. So they call it rocking, literally rocking. So you'll see one of them going down and one coming up, and the other 2 will be sitting completely up, and they should have their valve clearance, their complete valve clearance. And TDC, if everything is right and your engine is timed correctly with your camshaft timing and everything, TDC will be when the 2 on 7 and 8, one is going down and one is going up, when they're exactly level with each other. That will be damn near TDC. It'll be near enough that if you put your distributor in there and you have your rotor arm pointing at 1 that you will get the engine to fire with very little tweaking of the distributor, or if everything else is right, you've got all your wiring correct and stuff. So yeah, a little tip or a trick. So I still do that every single time I time an engine. So yeah, it works very well.
I mean, that's a great way to do it. And this is kind of with there are a few assumptions being made here based on your engine being the timing gear and the camshaft you mentioned kind of being in order, not in order, but in working order, kind of as they were from factory. If you have taken your engine apart and you've put all this new stuff in there, and your camshaft is way out of time or something like that, you've put too much advance on it, or maybe it just was not correctly installed before. Those can affect things downstream, or rather upstream, on your engine, and then kind of give you false readings there. This is the assumption that you might be working on an engine on a car that you may have just gotten, or something that has not had a lot of work done to it.
Yeah. So I suppose then, talking about performance gains, first thing I'll say to everybody out there is be very careful of falling into this dark hole that there's up in a distributor, in modifying your distributor, or affecting distributor, because it just isn't the case. What you will find is that there is the ignition system, as I said, performs a very specific function, and that function is to ignite the fuel and air mixture at the right time. If it is doing that, then that is all it can do. It can't make any more power. It's not a generator of power. It's not something that has the ability to enhance. A camshaft can make an engine make more power because it can move an engine into a place where it breathes better, so it can make more power. Or a cylinder head modification, or an exhaust, or even a carburetor. If it's been held back by the carburetor that's on it, a new carburetor can release more power. But ignition can't do that. Ignition can work perfectly or not right, but it can't make more power. And because I get people who ask me to fit, I know the ignition system you have, the wasted spark ignition system like you have, and they're disappointed because their car doesn't feel like it is any more powerful. And I explained to them, yes, but you had a perfectly functioning ignition system. It was working right. So it may be more economical, it may be more reliable, and it may have time, but you're not going to suddenly magic power up in the ignition system. It is unfortunately not there to be found.
That is a very, very good point. And you are unlocking. You are not adding power, you are unlocking power that you make. If power is being added or making something more economical, it's something that you have been without, and you are allowing the engine to now operate optimally. That's a really, really great segue, because people often think, as you just said, I bought this $500 1-2-3 distributor. Why am I not seeing 20 more horsepower? Why am I not seeing 30 more horsepower out of my car? And it's like, well, the 1-2-3 is a perfect example. You have all these different ignition curves, and those curves are what is going to allow your engine to operate optimally throughout the whole power band. And so your curve within the distributor is changing how much advance, or how much retard it has at any given RPM range, I think is probably a good way to think about that. And so you can buy a $500 distributor from any manufacturer who has a curve on it, or you can buy a 1-2-3 and adjust the curves and see how it is on your car. But that is kind of the basis.
It's that's a really nice way of putting it. So I only came to this realization a few years ago, to be honest with you. When I had a race engine that I had just finished. It was running a mapped ignition system, and the series I was racing in required that we change back to the old original distributor. We couldn't use this wasted spark ignition system anymore, and I removed it. I put the old system back on. I brought it to the rolling road, and to my utter amazement, the car made exactly the same amount of power as it made with the wasted spark ignition system. And when I brought it to the track and drove it, it drove pretty much identically. I could, I would have very difficult. It maybe didn't start quite as nicely, and maybe it lacked a tiny bit of bottom end power because the distributor just couldn't give it the ignition it wanted down there. But other than that, I couldn't tell you. And I had a really good chat with my Roland Road engineer at the time, and he said to me, the dyno guy, and he said to me, look, he said, the truth is, Paul, that your engine makes its power here and here really well between there and there. So it actually, it isn't just. Now, this probably is a bit of a segue towards what you're doing now, charging your engine. And once you start doing stuff like that, you start running into the limitations of a mechanically controlled distributor system or distributization system. And that's simply because you're going away from what is if you look at what a normally aspirated engine is going to do, it's just simply going to increase in RPM to a fixed point. And then the only way you can make that accelerate again is to change gear, which allows that engine to go back down and rev up to that fixed point. And, you know, a distributor is good at doing that because the faster you spin it, the more the weights expand and the more advance it can give, which is perfect.
Yep.
But the minute you bring in something like what you have, where you completely at some point change the characteristics of the engine, which in this case is add boost, you need to do something that distributors really don't like doing. And that's going from being advanced to retarding, which is giving less ignition. So I think maybe it might be a good point to talk about advanced and retard, maybe, and then we could talk about boosting.
I think that's a good idea. And so the idea of advancing and retarding the engine at its basic level is you are changing when that spark is happening in each individual cylinder. So your distributor is choosing, when both spark is firing, when in that compression stroke the spark is firing. And so if it's very, very far retarded, what's going to happen? And you might hear us saying this word. We're using this in the kind of engineering sense. I've seen a lot of people who get a little confused by this. I just want to mention it real quick. The act of retarding something is to reduce or slow down or bring back, and the act of advancing is to move it forward or increase when something might happen. And so it's an engineering term, and I think a lot of people get a little bit confused about that. But back to the topic. When you are spinning your distributor one way or the other, you are advancing it or retarding the system, changing when that spark happens. And so, when that spark is going to happen inside your combustion chamber. So sometimes, if it is too far, you are going to see that spark happening in the intake system. Maybe before a valve is closing, you could advance it so far that the spark is going to cause that combustion to happen either in the intake track, which would be, just going to get this as a visual aid. Your cylinder head is right here. Instead of having the explosion happen down here in the cylinder, you're causing it to happen maybe a little bit inside the head or in this intake track if it's very, very far advanced. And then on the flip side of that, if you have something that's super, super retarded on your system, you are going to have, that explosion happening in the exhaust. And you could see things like glowing hot red exhaust pipes, which would be an indication of a engine that is too far retarded and that explosion happening too late. So, basics of advance and retard there.
Totally. So, and the reason why we're advancing and retarding it is to just give the fuel time to burn, basically. So if you imagine if you have a piece of timber and you put it on the fire, it takes a specific amount of time for that piece of timber to be wholly consumed by the fire. In an engine, it's no different than that. When you add petrol and air together, there's a specific amount of time by which that will burn. Now, as you increase the RPM in an engine, well, what's happening is everything in the engine is happening faster, but that air and fuel still needs that same period of time to burn. So the only way we can beat that in an engine when we need to increase RPM is to ignite the air and fuel earlier on in the cycle. So if you think about an engine that is at idle, typically it's running an ignition advance of around 8 to 10 degrees, somewhere around that, a natural advance of around 8 to 10 degrees, meaning that when the piston is 8 or 10 degrees before it reaches the very top of its stroke, the spark is igniting, allowing the mixture to be fully burnt as the piston gets to the top of its stroke. Where, if
thus
you think
providing
about that,
the most power too in that stroke.
Absolutely. If you bring those revs up to, say, 4,000 RPM, that same period of time is going to be required, but everything is now moving so much faster that you might have to ignite that maybe as much as 30 degrees before the piston reaches the top of the stroke to gain that same amount of power. Now, what Cole talked about there, that ignition happening in the inlet or that ignition happening in the exhaust, absolutely. If you get this wrong or you give the engine too much retard or advance, either way, then that's exactly what can happen. You can lose power through your inlet, or you can lose power out through your exhaust by not by burning the mixture either too early or too late. So when we talked earlier about that black art of ignition, I think this is where people start to get a little bit, I think, confused. And I think to try and be as clear as we possibly can here, that fine tuning there, remember that what is happening in a distributor is that actual physical lumps of metal are being spun outwards to create this retardation or this advancing, right? If they're being spun out, they're advancing, right? The truth about that, lads, is that if you think about that, that's a linear thing. It's a straight line. It's not, it can't curve up and down. It can literally go in steps of stairs. That's all it can do. So it can go out a chunk, out a chunk, out a chunk, out a chunk. An engine doesn't necessarily want that. That's the problem. Sometimes what an engine actually wants is a completely different advance depending on its load. Now, load is something that we can get into, but it gets a bit more complicated. And load depends on how much of the engine's power is being used. So if you imagine your car spinning along on a flat road, it takes very little of the engine's power to maintain speed. But if you enter a hill, then all of a sudden you have a lot of load, and you need to get a lot of that power out of the engine to get that vehicle to propel up the hill. So when we look at how we tune engines, we tune them not only for getting that optimum amount of burn, but we also tune them for economy, and that is how much load the engine is going to be put under. So that's where we suddenly start to get into things like those 1, 2, 3 ignitions, the likes of the coil on plug or the wasted spark ignition systems, having a computer controllability to this, whereby not only are we going to affect mechanically, but we can digitally affect it if we know what speed and load is being applied to the engine.
Yep. And that is effectively what I am using on my car as we're going through this boosted whole deal is instead of relying on a distributor and its linear curve or linear line, really, as you very well put, we're moving into something called wasted spark, but allowing a computer to trigger that that actual ignition at a very so as you're going through your power band, instead of saying, okay, there's this much advance and this much advance and this much advance and this much, as you're going up in that RPM range and load range, you are saying, okay, I know the engine needs this much advance with this RPM based on the kind of load that I am delivering with boost or with, whatever other means of power increase you're doing on your car. And with that, that's where this ECU can say, okay, put this advance at this point, but actually, put this advance at this point, and maybe less over here. Here's where your turbo's kicking in. So I know that I need to change the advance at that point to be a little, maybe less advanced because we have boost and we don't want, to cause your engine to explode or something along those lines. That also removes that mechanical drive gear that we were talking about earlier. No longer are you relying on that gear and the camshaft to spin the gear and then spin your distributor. All you are relying on is in most cases, this is a little bit different on every car, but in most cases, you have a pulley with teeth on it. And I'm going to use a timing gear here just for illustration, but you have a pulley with teeth on it, and you take a tooth out at a specific point, which is really kind of variable. You can choose whatever that is, but most of the time people choose top dead center, and then they take a tooth out when the car is at top dead center. And when it is at that point, your sensor is seeing that tooth is missing, and that's how it has a reference to know where in the cycle of the engine it currently is, and then it knows how much advance or retard it should be delivering at the point of ignition. So it sees, okay, top dead center, that means in half a millisecond I need to give 5 degrees of advance, but then PM range, it sees, okay, I need to give it in a half a millisecond 8 degrees of advance, or whatever those numbers are. I'm just kind of making them up, but and then that's where you get your fine control over timing, and that's what ECUs on modern cars are doing. Also, though, modern cars are often using fuel injection now, but in my case, I'll be using a carburetor still. So the ECU only controls when that ignition is firing. That's a lot of words, I know, but for wasted spark ignition. But if there's anything you'd like to add to that, please do, Paul.
Yeah, I suppose on wasted spark is a great topic, I think, and it's something that we'll do more on in the future. I think when your car is up and running and we have a really good demo example, we will do a bit. You'll be able to figure out tech so we can show live. Matt, look, I'm going to drop you in all of this now, but you'll figure that out. I know you will.
Yeah, I'll just screen share myself going through mapping tables. It'll be so fun.
Totally. Yeah, it'll be totally fun. You'll yeah. Boop. Cold camera goes off. Finish for today. Good luck.
Oh, weird. The battery died again.
Oh, again. No, we'll go into this in more detail, and it'll be an interesting topic because I'm actually looking forward to seeing how it works for you and to getting back talking about that stuff, because what that actually allows us to do is to look more deeply into what is actually happening here. And when we start talking about a boosted engine, we start talking about creating pressure in a combustion chamber that is different to atmospheric pressure, and therefore we need actually less time to burn that same mixture that we would have had to have the last time. So you get into this situation where your actual ignition curve retards in the middle of its stroke. It reminds that same race car I talked to you about, where I had originally mapped ignition and then I dropped it back to the distributor. There was one very interesting incident in the whole power curves. What was very clear was we lost a very big chunk of mid-range torque. Now,
interesting.
It turned out to be no effect whatsoever on the race car because we didn't spend any time at that juncture anyway, so it wasn't actually a problem. The car was geared such that it ended up never in that portion of the power band. But it lost probably the guts of 20 foot-pounds of torque in the mid-range over sort of a couple of hundred RPM. And when we looked at that moment in time, we needed to add advance that wasn't physically built system, because if we had that much advance at that moment, we would have had too much at the top end when the engine became more volumetrically efficient because it was revving harder. So like, yeah, a lot of words, quite technical when we start getting deeper into that, but I'd happily go there with people if they want to, and we can have a look at that because we have really good data on that. And it can be a very interesting topic when you kind of get further into it. You start looking into, well, I don't know. It's very interesting to me. Maybe other people think, no, Paul, I just want the car to run nice. Stop. But
Well,
yeah.
that piece about pressure is pretty interesting. Because and I might liken this to cooking actually. For those of you who might have gotten into this like instant pot craze that maybe happened in the last year and a half or so, the idea of having a pressure cooker kind of works on the same principle. It takes less time to heat up and get something up to temperature and cook it when it's under pressure, because you can have a higher temperature just due to that compression, because all the little atoms are moving a little bit faster. As you compress things down, they generate heat and get angry and end up burning a lot faster. And so Instant Pot does this, your car does this, your radiator does this in your car as well. You can effectively increase the boiling point of water by increasing the pressure, which is what a lot of radiators do, to allow you to not have boil over issues in your car when you have temperatures exceeding that of boiling 100 degrees Celsius or whatever it is in Fahrenheit. I genuinely have no idea. And so yeah.
That's very interesting, actually. It would go completely off topic. I know we're on the dish to say, but an overheating Mini recently came to me, and the customer was already almost launched the road of buying himself aluminium radiators, silicone hose kits, new fan, electric fan, this fan, that fan, the other fan, tons of stuff. And I said to him, can I do one thing and try it, and then we'll go down the road of doing all that? And he said, yeah, sure. I said, we're going to change the rad cap. And I put one of those stamped proper, motorsport type radiator caps on. And what was on his car, and I spotted it the minute I opened his bonnet, was a really old, decrepit, sort of 3-pound cap from like an old early 850.
Oh, wow.
And what had happened was he had changed to a 1275. He had retained the original coolant system from the old 850, and the system under enough pressure to be able to take the heat from the engine, release it in the water, and actually keep the engine running cool. We put a 16-pound cap on the car, and it's, touch wood, and still running absolutely fine, and no overheating problems at all. So that was a quid modification that took about 3 minutes to do versus
I think
God only knows what he would have into.
With that short 3-sentence fix right there, I think you probably sent at least half of our viewers, the ones located maybe down in the south of the U.S. or in the southern Europe and all these hot climates, like, oh my God, they finally fixed it. I need to check my cap.
Go check your caps and come back to me.
Do
and
it
tell
now.
Me what cap you've got. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the amount of people that miss it, completely miss it. I had a guy years ago who came through my garage, and he genuinely was at his wit's end because he had put an aluminium rad in the car. He had done all the hoses. He'd done a new, the thermostat bypass. God, what this guy hadn't done. And the thing was overheating. And when I opened it, there was this beautifully shiny aluminium rad and this dull old cap clipped down the top of it. God. And I said, is that the cap that came with the rad? And he said, no, funny enough, it didn't come with a cap. I would have thought it did. And it had gotten, whoever was putting the rad together forgot to put the cap on or something. And, we put a new rad cap on. At the time, I hadn't the heart to tell him that was probably all that was wrong. But anyway, I told him, you've solved it now,
That is one of my biggest pet peeves, I have to tell you. And it seems to be a common theme with mini parts in general. I've not experienced this in different car worlds, but with minis, it's like you buy things from a lot of pretty major parts resellers. I won't name any, but and they won't include something that is absolutely required to do it, like, or to install the part that you've purchased. Like the radiator, I have received every radiator I've received, no cap, none, never come with
No,
it. You know,
it doesn't
you
make
buy
sense. It doesn't make sense.
a new K&N intake. Where's your
Yeah.
exhaust or the intake manifold gasket? Not included.
No,
Like,
don't
but
give you one.
why?
Yeah, why is this okay? Yeah, it is one of those. It's a pet peeve, and it's a mini thing. I don't know why, or maybe it's a British motor car thing. I don't know, but it is. We'll go off on one now, but this is it. I'm going to stop here now. A water pump. No, sorry, a thermostat. The other day, thing, no thermostat gasket. It's just such a little simple thing, like, But
It
if
is.
you're changing the thermostat, you definitely are going to need a thermostat gasket. Like, you're not
Yes.
going to not need.
Yes.
It.
Like, and
But,
if it's a matter of increase the cost and just include it, please.
please,
Man.
yeah, I will pay another euro, no problem. Yeah.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
we are reaching the top of the hour, and I think that now would probably be a good time to jump into our Q&A section. What do you think? Yeah. So, reminder for those of you who were not here at the beginning of the stream and have joined maybe a little bit later, we are opening up the stream to our Q&A section. This is where we will be answering your questions. And if you guys have any questions that you absolutely want answered, maybe consider using the super chat. This does help contribute to the cost of the streaming platform as well as our channels, and we greatly appreciate it. And all super chat questions are guaranteed answers, but we will also be doing our best to answer all of the other questions that are coming in as well. So start asking those questions.
Yeah, send them in. Yeah. An interesting one actually came up there. I've just been kind of watching some of the chat, and the guys were talking about running, wasted spark for years, and I remember back maybe, I'd say it's probably 15, it could be 20 years ago, when a very interesting guy in the States, actually your side of the pond, figured out that he could make a little module that would interact with the Ford EDIS system. So that you could scavenge a Ford EDIS module and the Ford wasted spark coil pack from that era, and you could put that in and work on with this little module. And he actually sold it a bit like an Arduino is sold. All of the resistors, and you soldered the whole together yourself and put it into a little closure, and you connected it into the EDIS and built yourself a wasted spark ignition system. Was very, very kind of ahead of its time. Like, we were dialing into the internet with modems.
Super creative.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was phenomenal, and we used to order it from him. I think the guys it was called Mega Jolt was the name of and I presume they still exist, and they're doing, hopefully still doing brilliantly well for themselves.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's funny. Mini Performance actually just mentioned, isn't that Mega Jolt?
That's exactly the one. Yeah. Mega Jolt. Yeah, back in the day.
Here's a question I want to answer. What's the benefits of a turbo? Well, you see, going fast, making noises, and having fun. That's the benefit right there.
I thought it was because you could. I thought the sole purpose of turbos was so when you had you could add a dump valve. No, was that not?
That's the only reason. Yeah. For those of you who don't know what a dump valve is, it is a small valve connected to your boost system, and when you let off your accelerator and all of that extra boost that is now not going to be used by the engine comes out, and that's what makes
a pushing sound that everyone.
Yes.
Oh, if you hear that, it must be powerful.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else do we have here? Mark C says, "Hey, big fan of both of your channels. Thank you. Is there an advantage of?" Whoops, lost the chat here. Is there an advantage of changing to an electric fuel pump over the mechanical fuel pump?
Very interesting. Is there an advantage? I would have to say, like, I don't know whether you're wondering if there's a performance advantage. I'd say there's an advantage, all right, and the advantage is more than likely going to be long-term reliability, I suppose. Performance advantage would only really come, I think, when you reach the capacity of the mechanical fuel pump to pump fuel. Possibly. Although
Yes.
in the turbo setting, that would be different because you need to get fuel pressure. So
Yes.
go on, Cole.
Yeah, I would totally agree. There's not a inherent performance benefit to an electric fuel pump, but the old mechanical fuel pumps, the way that they're driven is via the camshaft. You have this like beam that goes into the engine block, and then as the camshaft's going, you have this like kind of chopping action that's happening, and it's pumping fuel through this thing. And I like the electric pumps better. I find that they're more reliable, as you said, Paul, and you have more control over that pressure. So for a turbo setup where you need the pressure of the fuel to increase as you are increasing the flow of air and you're trying to get more power and adding boost, you need an electric pump really to generate that additional pressure and flow, really additional flow to accommodate the pressure that you require. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay. 8 says, with the risk of starting a debate, what is the best engine oil to use for a road or, best engine oil to you for road or race? I'm going to let you answer that first, Mr. Race Mechanic.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Out straight. Look, there's a million different oils in the market. There really, really is. And the best oil for your engine is going to be the one that meets the specification of the greatest number of components, right?
You're so full of it. Get out of here.
That sounds like that a solicitor wrote that for me earlier this morning.
Oh my God, you need to go run for parliament.
Have shovel, will dig.
So, Paul, I will add a little bit to that. I would say for my North American market, I would say my favorite high performance oil is Valvoline VR1 oil. It's a high zinc content 20W50 oil. That's my favorite. And then for more of a road going car, you can use that same oil. But I have had very nice experiences with Miller's 20W50 oil as well.
Absolutely. I mean, here's one for you, right? I've been running Valvoline. Jesus, I can't remember the exact spec off my head. I feel like it was 1060, but it's something. It's somewhere around that, which in a normal Mini would kill the gearbox in probably 10,000 miles, probably less. But it works perfectly fine in my race car because I'm using dog engagement gear kits and there's no synchros to have any issues there whatsoever. All of the bearings are absolutely more than happy to deal with that oil. That oil is well able to maintain a pressure film at that junctures or whatever you want to call it. But it's that is where while I did make the most non-answery, most politicians' answer to that question. Components are a very key aspect of oil choice, and you mentioned the high zinc. People don't seem to realize that that's not an engine thing; that's a gearbox thing. We need zinc for the gearbox.
Absolutely.
In fact, let me be honest: stainless steel valves don't like high zinc at all. It's not something they like. And if you've got bronze valve guides with stainless steel valves running in them, you can expect significant valve wear with high zinc content. But it's a payoff. Which is easier to deal with on a Mini, the gearbox or the cylinder head? I would much prefer to be putting valves in a cylinder head than replacing gearboxes. So,
Oh God, yes, absolutely.
so
Pull the engine
that,
just to replace some stupid synchros or deal with
yeah,
some
yeah,
fiddly bit in the gearbox.
because you wanted to make sure your valve guides lasted longer. But
Uh-huh. So we
yeah.
have a super chat from Barry, saying thank you for that, Barry. And
Hello,
he has
Barry,
a
and
question
thank
for
you.
you, Paul.
Okay.
Paul, as you know, the engine I'm building is a programmable Dizzy, worth the investment, or is the standard one good enough?
So the really simple answer, or the most straightforward answer to that, is you will achieve uh, the performance that engine has in its peak power and its peak torque with a distributor that is, in good working order. Is there advantages, like we were kind of talking about earlier on? There may be advantages from the point of view of making the engine more reliable in wet weather. You may well find that you can get a better overall power curve from a CSI. I think they even have one now that you can do on your phone. So definitely, if you intend on bringing that car to a rolling road and getting him to tune it to get the most out, then there is advantages to be had with a modern mappable ignition system. But if what you're really interested in is getting peak performance and peak power, then a good quality standard system will work fine.
Yeah, I resonate all of those things. I know the question was for Paul, but I am going to say I agree.
Yeah, interesting. Sorry, I just seen one coming in from Turbo Cooper Sports about internal fuel lines. It's not really a question, but it is a very good point. And I actually just had a chat with a guy there recently who was running a road car to run in, strongly dissuaded him from that. Because, to be honest with you, internal fuel lines make a lot of sense in a racing car which is equipped with a proper fire suppression system.
Yes.
And it makes complete sense there. But in a situation where you have carpets, soft furnishing, seats, adding into that mix the potential for high pressure fuel, in my opinion, is a recipe for disaster, especially in an old classic type vehicle that will not come off well in an accident.
Yep. No matter what, you are going to be in relatively bad shape with an older car in any sort of accident. There's no way around that. But the even additionally, from all of the safety items, kind of withstanding, which are extremely important, as Paul's mentioned, rubber hose, almost all rubber fuel lines, even hard lines, will sweat, and they sweat the smell of gasoline, and it will make you high. It is very, very overwhelming. There's a reason when you see race cars, you have these like huge fresh air vents being funneled directly into their helmets, and channels being run. There's so many fumes generated, and by putting the lines inside, you're adding additional fumage into your car too, which is not great.
No, I completely agree. I've seen a lot of road cars over the years come in where people have put fuel lines through the car. The only system that I have ever seen, and I still don't recommend this, but if you absolutely insist that you're going to put fuel lines through your car, spend the money and buy Teflon lined piping and use proper air equip quality bulkhead fittings. Put it this way, someone came to me right now and said the best system for running fuel lines through a car, expect to pay 300-400 euros, and for the equivalent of that in dollars, to plumb a fuel line inside a car safely. And even then, it's still going to be questionable, as opposed to 20 quid's worth of copper pipe, and you can run it externally and it'll be perfectly safe. and just as reliable, you know.
Yep, totally agree with that. And we mentioned this in our last live stream, but there is additional consideration with fuel lines now with the ethanol or heavier ethanol content in your fuel. And there's this great meme, any problem that you have on your car it's the fault of the new ethanol fuel, which is not necessarily the case. It's just it's starting to identify issues with your car that maybe you didn't know you had, or maybe you did know you have, and you might not have been addressing, namely old rubbery fuel lines and things of that nature. So, when you are putting new fuel lines into your car, you're also going to want to think about the ethanol content and adding lines that can handle that, because old rubber lines will essentially melt from the inside if they don't have the right lining, which is that Teflon lining.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can sense in the near future us having a conversation about these fuels and their effects on minis. I don't know. It's one of those. I think it might just be my fifth sense or whatever, but I can hear it coming.
We have five senses, right?
No,
it's your sixth.
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't.
I can barely see, Cole. Without these AirPods, I can't hear. My sense of touch, tongue being burnt off my skin from the welding.
You're like the Men in Black with no fingerprints.
Maybe 3 at max.
Oh no.
Yeah. I was being good to myself by putting a fifth sense in there,
Oh, we had a question go up here a little bit higher. Let's see here. That was kind of ignition related. I wanted to mention. Gelto says, what are your not using a vacuum advance on a fast road engine or any engine? And what kind of degrees should it be set on idle when not using a vacuum advance?
Wow. Okay.
Do you want me to start, or you want to start?
Go. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So first things first, assuming that you are using the vacuum advance, which I would probably run regardless, you do need to be setting your timing, your base idle timing, without the vacuum advance connected and those lines plugged. You are not going to be setting your base timing correctly if either of those are open, or if they're just disconnected, like hanging off somewhere. It's going to cause a vacuum leak and then cause timing issues. But that said, I personally have always run the vacuum advance, even on high performance engines. I think that it's, generally speaking, the right choice to make. But I am prepared to be wrong on that. So curious to hear what you think about that, Paul.
So yeah, I generally recommend to people that I would ditch vacuum advance once I started to get into sort of anything more than a fast camshaft. So if you start getting camshafts that are breaking 2 degrees duration, really, vacuum advance starts to become a problem because of a characteristic that happens called reversion. So in engines that have a significant amount of camshaft, in their early stages of throttle opening, so part throttle opening, you get, or you experience, a symptom that is known in the industry as the engine being off its camshaft, which is basically there is fuel and air being sent back through the inlet system, and it's just a part that we can go into that another stage. The truth is that causes weird things to happen with vacuum advance, whereby it can actually draw retardation into the system. So it can actually put pressure down it can put pressure down the vacuum advance system, and it can actually retard the ignition, which can be very poor for an engine that's at part throttle, that's already suffering this reversion. So yes, I would always go vacuum advance with a performance engine up to and including engines running about 260 duration. Once you start getting outside of that, that's when I'd start ditching the vacuum advance. As far as what angle should it be at idle, look, I can give you a ballpark figure, and I'd say to you to start with around 8 degrees. It tends to always be a good starting point. But to set ignition timing on a performance engine, it needs to be done by a trained professional who has the ability to load that engine at a few different places and listen for detonation and be able to also check fueling at those points. So really, I can give you that baseline setting and say start at that. What I would always do, and this is a personal thing, if I was going to run an engine that I knew was performance in nature, I wouldn't really care very much about what its base setting was, but actually what its maximum advance is. So I'd run the engine up to around 3.5, 4,000 RPM. And with my timing light, I would check, and I would be looking to make sure I wasn't getting much more than about 27, 28 degrees of advance. And for a Mini, in most cases, that is a very safe setting. But again, as I said, back that up very solidly with, you really shouldn't be mucking around with that stuff unless you really know what you're doing. And you know, for the sake of the few £100 it might cost to get it properly set up, it's very worthwhile when you think how much you've invested in that engine to make it performance related.
And I think those are great tips. We sometimes suffer from the inability to have a trained professional here in the US who can do these things for us, unfortunately. And those tips are really great. You know, the base setting, that 8 degrees at idle is a very good safe setting for you to kind of start out at. And that maximum advance, the thing is, you don't want to just shove it up to maximum and, you know, at 4,000 RPM, you're like, yeah, all right, it's at 27 degrees. You need to see how your engine is running. You need to see, you know, how it feels. And like, it really, if you have some way of measuring and checking that detonation, maybe you find a shop that has a rolling road, that has some sort of detonation, tool. You know, they have the ability to check to see if you're getting that detonation, and then maybe you get in there and tune it a little bit. And most of these shops, while they don't know Minis, you know, if you find someone who is helpful or is willing to kind of get in there with you, you offer your help, offer to get in there and say, okay, this is how the distributor is working on this car, give them some base information. They might be able to help you out. But that still kind of goes back to try and find somebody who is a professional who can help you with this stuff.
Yeah, totally. With the other one, bearing in mind, obviously, you guys struggle a little bit with trying to find, you know, people who can do this. If you're in that stage where you're learning to set ignition up and you're learning to kind of listen for it, one of the simplest things you can do is find yourself a reasonably steep hill, and you get yourself in the position where start with your ignition backed off. Don't start with it wound on. Start with it backed off. As I said, start with 6 or 8 degrees and try your car through and you're listening very carefully for what is the sound that Cole described as detonation. And this sounds like a clattering or clink sound in the engine. If you have drove a modern small turbo diesel engine and given it hard acceleration at low RPM, you'll hear this kind of this detonation sound because they actually allow them to do that. The ECUs can actually control it, and you hear this kind of a clunk. I always, there's a place very near me that teaches people how to drive, and they do hill starts on my road a lot, and I hear it all the time. I hear detonation all the time when they do these hill starts, it amazes me actually how much an engine will put up with that and allow that. But modern fuel injection systems and ECUs can actually detect knock and allow an amount of it that's safe and you know, hold back from too much. But yeah, we might have to do a segment on
I think that
knock
would be a really
detection at
good
some
thing to have a
stage.
segment on.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll show you
so
how to
one of
make
my
deck cans one of these days. It's a way of listening to not knock. I actually, you know who we did them for? Our friend that makes our t-shirts. Lewis.
Yes, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, we made him a set because he hasn't got a rolling road near him, and he has a set of deck cans, which is like of headphones, but it has a tube on it, and you can listen to the engine. You bolt it onto your engine, and you can listen to hear detonation. Very good way of tuning.
That's pretty cool.
You know, if you don't have it. So yeah, we'll do a DIY with Paul and Cole. I'll show you how to make it.
That'll be cool.
Alrighty.
So we have one of the folks that's on my Patreon, Alex Zavaro. He is actually out in Hawaii. We've got ethanol-free fuel here, but I've never tried it. Do you think it'd be better than using regular fuel? I would say yes. I would use ethanol-free fuel if I have it available to me, because the ethanol in the fuel is, even if you have, I don't know what work you've had done to your cylinder head, but if you have the stock valve seats, ethanol fuel can be very aggressive and damage those valve seats from the original leaded fuel cylinder head. So a lot of times hardened valve seats are put into the cylinder heads now to help handle that ethanol-based fuel or not unleaded fuel as well. And so I would say absolutely. I think it's going to extend the life of your engine, and you're going to have less issues down the road if you can consistently use it.
Yeah, absolutely. To add to that, just I've started to see, because people are using it here, and started to see it's very aggressive on the SU needles as well. I've seen SU needle, one car come in here that started to run really poorly, and there was quite a significant amount of needle and jet damage. Now I'm putting it down to the ethanol at the moment. I don't have conclusive proof, but this car was running fine for a year, and then suddenly the fueling started to go wrong. And what has changed in that year? So we'll watch space. But if I had the option to get away from it, I would run my car on the lowest ethanol possible.
And that is something to think about. I mean, these engines were built for an era that had both leaded fuel and no or very, very little ethanol count in the fuel. So the closer you can get your fuel to what the factory was expecting them to run on, you're probably going to be in better shape.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Okay. What else have we got?
You pick us a question.
Okay, we a couple came in there. What was this one? I seen one popped in. Maybe you can find it. That was where was it? The guy was asking. He had his distributor set up, but I think it wasn't starting, and he had to wind it back. It's gone by on me. I can't see it, but
I think this one here is it. Deidrius, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Hey, where should I start my troubleshooting? Timing done as it's supposed to be 998 with an HS4 carburetor. To start the engine, I have to rotate the distributor anti-clockwise a lot, and then only then it starts. Then to have smooth running engine, I have to rotate the Dizzy back to the mark. Any tips? That's a tricky one.
Yeah, that sounds to me like one of two things. I think Mini Performance may actually have mentioned this as well in the comment section. You may well be out 1 point on the cap. In other words, you've gone, you had your cap pointing between maybe not pointing at cylinder 1. It might be pointing actually more closer to cylinder number 4, and by you actually winding that back, you might have got there. And Mini Performance mentioned this, which could also be it.
Sorry, lost my microphone.
That's okay. That's all right. That's okay. Yeah, he was talking about the drive. So basically, the drive is the thing at the bottom of the distributor slots into. So in the bottom of your distributor, you have this drive here, and it is not symmetrical. So it's actually offset. So Cole has shown you there what it would slot into, and you can see that it isn't symmetrical. So typically speaking, you want that slot pointing at 2 o'clock, pointing up towards 2 o'clock. But if you have it the exactly a budget one, they're out of whack. Have I gone down here?
All right. Are we back? Can everybody hear us? Looks like Paul might still be frozen. Hey, Paul, can you hear us?
Back.
Sounds like you're starting to come back. If you guys can hear us, go ahead and drop a message in the chat. Hello, everyone. Looks like we are having some technical difficulties, so I'm trying to get everybody back connected here. All right, so looks like I will hold down the fort here until we get Paul back reconnected. It looks like I see him in the background here.
All right. Back.
Yeah.
Hello. All right. Minor tilties.
All right, that'll just keep us on our toes, eh?
Hello.
Hello. We're back and we've located the princess. So looks like Paul at least is still frozen on my side here, so I'm going to hold down the fort. We can continue asking questions until we'll get Paul back in here. So for those of you who asked questions in the last like 5 minutes or so, I didn't see them, and I don't think Paul probably saw them either. So if you would be so kind as to post those again, and we can get this stream back going here. Oh my gosh, we just can't win today with the technology. All right, I think we got Paul coming back in here.
We're coming
There
back.
we go. Are you here?
Hello, hello.
Oh my goodness. Computers are hard.
Wow. Technicals. Many. My apologies, everybody. The internet just ran out in Ireland. There was none left. I had to get more internet.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess that happens. You probably ran out of your pot of gold, right?
This is what it is. There was another person in Dublin who also needed to use the internet, and unfortunately we had to visit him for a minute.
Oh yeah, classic dial-up woes, huh?
Oh look, it's the way it is, you know. But I got my mother off the phone now, so we're away again.
Mom, get off the phone!
I'm doing a live stream. Bloody hell!
Oh man.
Okay. So where were we?
I have no idea. We were talking about drive gears there for a minute, and then you were holding up a distributor. I was holding up a drive gear, and then that's I think
we broke the internet.
That's what we did. We just broke it with all of our mechanical talk.
We're so good, yeah. It was the E10. That's what done it. Bloody E10.
Oh,
I think some of it.
Damn it!
It dripped off this distributor onto my laptop. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Okay, so yeah. We were doing this, and basically what we were saying was that this guy, I can't remember the poor man's name, but he was having trouble, and we reckoned it was one of two things. Either his distributor wasn't pointing at the right spot, or he might have got this into the wrong position. So these are offset. They're not symmetrical. So there's only one way in it can go. So you got to match the two of them up. I think that will answer that person's question, hopefully.
Yeah. Alrighty. Let's see. What else do we have here? We have a few more. I asked everybody to post their questions again because neither of us probably saw them as they were. We were gone.
Sorry, guys.
And it said Mini Performance said, "Don't worry, that they were just abusing us while we were gone." So it's
that's
no big deal.
I look forward to when I watch this stream back at some stage to watching all the abuse that came my direction.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be bad. Oh, okay. So Max Lizardi says, "How are classic Mini values doing?" Kind of unrelated to ignition and timing, but kind of a general question. And I would say they're doing pretty well, especially for some of the older ones. There are some folks making some pretty pennies off of minis right now.
I'm amazed, actually. I'm honestly amazed that somebody asked me this the other day. Have minis reached their peak yet in value? And I actually don't think they have. I think there's more to go, and it's in one way that's frightening, to be honest with you, because some of the older stuff, like early S's now are making sort of 50 and 60,000 pounds sterling, which to
is,
me, that just seems bizarre. It absolutely does. But
yeah,
I think that they haven't reached the peak of their value yet, because we're seeing a stage right now where minis are still relatively easy to come by. Give that 10 more years, and you're going to see a lot more mainstream minis reaching values like what Cooper S's probably are making now. That's the way I can kind of see it going.
It's pretty
as
wild
as they
too. I
become
mean,
rare.
the idea of spending that much on a mini seems so foreign to so many people. But when you compare
Me,
it to other classic, yeah, I mean, when you compare it to other classic cars, though, you know, these cars that are in this age range, that's the kind of money that they're fetching. And I think minis are actually kind of trailing behind most other modern
I really think they
cars.
are. Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with you, and I think that's why we haven't seen the peak yet. I mean, I got a huge shock in last year actually when I started looking for a Series 3 Land Rover again, because I had had them pass through my hands 20 years previous for hundreds of euros, not thousands. And then
Hmm.
I looked at the market last year and got an absolute shock of my life when I seen the prices that these vehicles were fetching now. So the whole classic car market, to be honest with you, anything sort of 60s and 70s seems to have just skyrocketed in value, because I think there's thankfully actually a resurgence in people have suddenly realized how cool it is to have these pieces of motoring history and keep
Hmm.
them alive and keep them on the road. So fair play to everybody who is spending that money, because you are keeping them alive and keeping them on the road. But yeah,
Yep.
I can see
It's
minis.
funny. On one hand, you're keeping them on the road, and then on the other hand, it's like it's making it harder for the common fella to get into it, which is saddening. But
Unfortunately,
yeah, I
unfortunately, yeah,
guess.
yeah, and you're seeing that more and more. I'm seeing more less and less young starter out people in minis. Like when I got into minis, I got into it in my teenage years, whereas
Hmm.
I don't see very few teenagers with them now. I don't
Yeah.
see them, because they just are unobtainable, I think would be the
Hmm.
word. Yeah.
So looks like we got a super chat in here from Mark B. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
And
Thank you very much.
he says, my intake man has two hoses on top, one connected to my servo and a much smaller one that the previous owner snipped and plugged with a screw. Thoughts? Yeah, I have an idea what that might be.
Yeah,
Um,
go for it.
okay, so um, I'm not sure where the holes are coming out of your intake. They sometimes were in different places, but most intake manifolds had that had a servo attached to them had this kind of like boss on them, or had a port coming out of the carburetor. One of those, as you have on your car, is running to the servo, which is creating that vacuum to operate that servo. But a lot of them have either a connection here, which you can see I've got a hose that's kind of wrapping around, and then there's sometimes one on the manifold here, and then there's sometimes another one right there. Those three generally are connected to the breather system. Actually, you know what? This is a turbo carb, it's a little bit different, but um, my guess is that you no longer have lines running from your breather, your crankcase breather that might live on your transmission transfer housing where the clutch is, or on the backside of your engine. You no longer have those lines running up and into the intake. They might just be vented to atmosphere. So it's probably just a plugged breather line, and that's a very common way that people have kind of deleted those, would be my
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, yeah. The only other time I've seen that was some of the oscillators or those type of aftermarket manifolds had a vacuum port on them for a gauge. Back in the day, vacuum
Oh, yeah.
gauges were a big tuny thing, and a lot of people used to run them. And they would have a little slim vacuum port on the inlet manifold to allow you to connect a vacuum gauge for, tuning or something of that caliber. I use inverted
Hmm.
commas because, it is more of a gimmick than it is really anything else.
Yeah.
I see Mini Performance says that he sees loads of young people buying minis and joining their club. I'm chuffed to hear that. I cannot tell you how
Mhm.
good that is to hear. I'm delighted, and I hope that is the case. Unfortunately, I don't see it here in Ireland as much. We would be a much smaller population and have much less people in the car scene. So I suppose maybe that's why I don't see that here. I suspect it might be similar in the UK or US as well, maybe because again,
Yeah.
smaller group of minis available and
Mhm.
more people, but I can imagine The cost of these cars.
Yeah. People aren't looking at a Mini and thinking, man, I really want to spend $50,000 on a Mini. $50,000 gets you a lot of much larger classic cars that have a much bigger fan base here.
Imagine it also
so-
gets you a chance of like college or something like that.
Oh, that's like a semester and a half of college.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah. So yeah, I can imagine that might be more important.
Yeah, don't
before
even
your
get me
Mini.
started on healthcare.
Yeah, we won't go there. Let's not go there. We'll have a chat with that one later.
Oh no. Oh man. Let's see here. What else do we have? Oh, Ollie has a interesting. It doesn't look like there's a question here, but lucky enough to watch Mini Cooper S's racing at Goodwood last weekend. I wondered how they were able to run their suspension so low. My race-ish high lows, red dot cones, and KYB shocks don't even get close.
Witchcraft. That's what's happening there.
Uh-huh.
No, Ollie, you passed a nice comment earlier. Thank you very much. You followed the Gearbox videos and you found them helpful. So thank you very much. So shout out there. Also, to answer that to the best as I can, so I have built one of these FIA Cooper S type minis. In fact, I'm wearing my artisanized picture of that car. How we get those to run that low, we modify the high lows very heavily. We also modify, we have specifically made shock absorbers that are much shorter than the kind of ones you can buy OE from the factory. And we run incredibly heavy bump stops. So basically we, in those instances, want very little suspension movement at all, because the car is not going through potholes or bumps or over speed ramps or anything like that. We just need enough suspension movement to allow the car to be able to take up the surface of the track, and that's it really after that. So you could in theory drive one of those FIA race cars down the road, but you'd want to be really confident with your dentist's work prior to that drive. I can tell you that.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine driving that on some of the roads here. It hurts me to think about it.
I have a very funny story actually of a friend of mine who I was working on his race car, and he got a notion that he wanted to test his gearbox, and he said, "Sure, and it was one of these FIA cars. He said, "I'll bring it up your lane." And beside my house is a very kind of straight private lane that it's probably half a kilometer long, but it's a private lane, so it's not maintained by the roads people. It's maintained privately by us, and it is perfectly passable for any kind of a normal vehicle. But by God, did he get some shock when he tried to drive his race car up there. I think he said to me he didn't take it out of first gear because he was terrified, I think was the word he used. So, yeah. I know that wasn't really a question, Ollie, but hopefully that answers what's going on there, how they're working.
EJ Pro Mods has a pretty interesting question. How do you do line honing for block in your garage? I would say you don't. Personally, I would not trust myself to do that correctly. But I think if anyone who would trust themselves or has the ability to do it, I think is the other person on this call.
So tip my own cap here. I did a video series on exactly how I did a video series on how I line bore engine blocks in my own workshop using my 1939 Colchester student lathe. Well, actually Colchester senior lathe. But I don't actually line hone. So line honing is a third or a second operation. You bore and then you hone to size. But I actually don't do line honing because you need a hone mandrel, which is this absolutely ginormous piece of equipment which has a whole load of hones on it, and it's a mandrel, and it would sit in the lathe and it spins. and I think they're about $1,000 for just one hone. So, no is the answer. For the 4 engine blocks a year that I get to line bore, it wouldn't make any sense. So yeah, I line bore them and I hone them by hand. So I hone them using honing stones and just hand hone them. And
Yeah.
I haven't actually done a video on the honing process, but it's not very interesting. So
Yeah, it is fun. It's not interesting, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's very fun. The ones I use are an American brand, actually. What are they called? They have all the little balls on them. They're
Yes.
What are they called? God, the name's.
I'm gonna see if I can find a photo here and share it.
Yeah, you probably have one. I might have one in my toolbox here.
I don't have one. I have used one when I worked in diesel mechanics, but I never.
The brand is brilliant. If I can think of who they are, but that is one. This is a small one. It's for doing the cam follower guides. You can see.
Oh yeah, look, I've never seen one that tiny before. That's cool.
Yeah. Come back into camera, Paul. Yeah. So that's the one. I use that for honing the cam follower guides, so you can hone them out and make them the right size. But yeah, it's a little tiny one. But yeah, you can get those to size for pretty much any size. They're quite expensive. That's the only thing. But they work brilliantly well. Yeah, that's a much better picture of it.
Yeah. So this and the little balls, basically, you might have seen that kind of like cross etched pattern in a brand new, freshly cleaned engine block that's just been gotten back from the the machine shop, and this is the device that's actually doing that. That's causing those little, very pretty honing marks.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. It's not by any manner of means the perfect way to do it. Line honing is the right way to do it, where that's actually on a physical mandrel that sits in the engine block. It's the right way to do it. But minis being minis, if you can trust yourself and measure accurately enough, you can get away with it. And you can make it work.
I think that's the problem. I don't trust myself.
Yeah. To be honest with you, it's something that it's so time consuming, and it's actually so cheap to get it done by a professional that it doesn't make a lot of sense to tool up at home to do that kind of work. The only reason I do it here is because in Ireland, unfortunately, machinists are so few and far between. Getting that done on a mini block is nearly impossible in the UK.
Really?
Excuse me. Yeah, in the UK, you could get it done pretty much anywhere. Any decent machine shop will have the ability to do that. In Ireland, there's probably 2 that can do it, that are within a reasonable distance of my garage, and I'd probably have to leave an engine block with them for a year before they'd get around to actually doing it. So that's why I tooled up and did it at home, to have that inside my own ability. But yeah, unless you're living in a little small island like this, I think get the professional to do it.
I actually, I know this is sacrilegious because I have, my channel literally has the term DIY in it. But there are a certain few jobs that are just, they're just worth to bring it to a shop and have them do it. I mean, like, you can spend some time in your garage doing a string alignment, which I think you recently did a video on.
Totally.
And you end up with really great results. But depending on where you are in the world, for me, it takes $70 and I can bring the Mini to a shop and they smack on some alignment magnets, and then I'm out driving again. So
there's so much stuff that it totally depends on where you are and what you have available to you. But there's some stuff it just doesn't make any sense anymore.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, here's a good one. Favorite grease for wheel bearings.
That's a very good one. Yeah.
Yeah. I a lot of times you will find that the wheel bearings, when you buy a kit, akin to the things that we were complaining about earlier, don't come with enough grease, or
totally.
don't come with a very high quality grease. And
I'm curious to. Yeah, I want you to start because I want to see what you have
Oh,
before I
so
answer.
I use Timken's grease. Timken actually supply a grease,
Oh,
and my local bearing supplier sells Timken bearing grease. So I literally just buy that for it. It comes in tubs. I was looking back there to see if I got one, but I actually just realized I ordered some on Friday, so I don't have any. But
oh,
yeah, that's what I use. I use the Timken brand. Timken have
that's
their
really
own one
cool.
branded. I'm not sure. It's obviously not their grease. It's just a grease that they support and have repackaged. Or maybe
Hmm.
somebody who knows will tell me, yeah, maybe Timken do make grease. I don't know, but that's the one I use, and it's a kind of a dark red color. You see it in any of the very high quality greases. They generally tend to be that dark red, high, kind of very high viscosity. They're just really good quality. But yeah,
Yeah.
other than that, a good quality make like liquid moly or one of those, I presume, would be good. What about you?
I I end up using so for it depends on the type of bearing I'm installing. If for whatever weird ass reason I am installing the original ball bearings, then I will use a standard ball bearing grease. But I tend to err on the side of synthetics when I can. And I use a Valvoline high temp synthetic wheel bearing grease, especially with the roller bearings, the Timken roller bearings, and I have had really really good experiences with that. The wheel bearings on my Mini when it's driving are deeply abused. I just those poor wheel bearings,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it just holds up to it. I've had wheel bearings. Usually, I don't have to replace my wheel bearings, but once every 2 years, which is kind of all right for a Mini, especially when you beat the snot out of it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I actually used to use that. I think I used the exact Valvoline product you're talking about.
Hmm.
Previous until I found out I could get the Timken one, and that's the only reason I changed from that one to the Timken one. But um, I would say for the roller bearings, yeah, I agree. Sometimes that grease. I know Timken told me about this, or one of the representatives told me recently about it, that they recommended a completely different non-synthetic grease for those. Um,
Interesting.
and I don't know why, but he had a very good reason for it, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. And it made me think, because I was just putting it in everything, and he said no. Certain roller bearings actually that are ball bearings, it's not actually good because it can cause the ball to slip in the race rather than turn.
Oh,
Because it's
interesting.
such
Well,
a big, because if you look at the ball, it has a tiny, tiny surface area, whereas the roller has a massive surface area. So
yeah, it's
I'm more
just a
inclined to
huge
roller.
surface.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting. I always did it just because it felt like it was more of just a feeling. That's cool to know that there might be an actual
Yeah, there is
reason.
something about it. Yeah, he did. He definitely mentioned to me something. He recommended the lithium based greases because of
Huh.
the fact that there's the 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 lithium powder in them, which helps them to roll
Mm-hmm.
or something. I don't know what it is, but he explained it to me properly. I'll ask him again actually, and I'll reference it the next time.
Very cool.
Yeah, but there's
Well,
definitely something about it.
we are coming up on 2 hours here. And so I want to give people just maybe a 5 minute warning or so. We're
Yeah.
probably going to be wrapping this up here shortly. So if you guys have any questions that you haven't asked, pop them into the chat now. And we will get those answered if you have any more.
Yeah. I suppose while we're waiting for those last couple of questions to come in, usual, thank you all very much for tuning in. We've moved, as you've noticed, to a Sunday slot as opposed to the Saturday slot that we did the last three. Just people's feelings, or if anybody has any comment to make on that. I think we might try and do Sunday for the next couple of slots.
Mm-hmm.
If people are cool with that. I know some people seem to be working on the Saturdays and stuff, so maybe it's a bit better for people on the Sunday. For me, it makes no real difference, and I know for Cole, I think you were saying the same. It's kind of
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, we all like hanging out and talking minis on a Sunday, huh?
Yep. wind down, gotta
Yeah.
just get out in the garage, work on some
Yeah, it's
stuff,
nice.
even if there's nothing to
Yeah.
work on.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like it. I think it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I also want to reiterate that. Thank you so much, everybody who's joined in this live stream. It's been fun so far. We have a few more questions rolling in, so don't worry, we'll get to those. And I think that I would also very much like to hear, what days work best for y'all. And obviously the weekends are probably the best days for both of us. But it looks like we got a few folks over in Oceania logging in right now. Early morning in New Zealand.
Good morning, New Zealand.
Yes. Hey, wait a minute.
What now? The internet always amazes me. Isn't it so cool that there's people from all around the world able to be
Just pop in.
just sit in our garage and chat about minis. It's cool. It's
Uh-huh.
awesome.
Just casually talking to some folks that are 5,000 miles away or however far away
From
they are from each of us.
probably both of us. They're actually probably the same distance away from you and me. Pretty much the
Uh-huh.
same. I can't imagine there's much in the difference. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's
But
one.
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, go.
Anthony Hartnett says BP8ES plugs question mark for a 1380 running 12.1 comp and a 300 cam runs up to 8,500 RPM. Yeah,
Yeah.
seems fine to me.
That would sound good to me. Yeah, totally.
Mhm.
Depends on the driving, I suppose. You
Mhm.
could potentially get away with a 7 if a lot of the driving was moderate to fast road, but you would know very quickly whether whether the 7s were getting too hot. So I'd keep an eye on them and see. I that style of engine sounds very kind of race orientated with that cam, and I imagine it doesn't perform much below sort of 3,000 RPM. So yeah, I would say you're probably fairly spot on with 8s. Maybe just cold starting might be a small bit of a problem. Just watch it. I'd say when you're starting that motor, just keep it nice and warm. Don't let the revs drop too much in the early part of starting that engine until you get a bit of heat into it. And you could fail an 8 pretty easy there, but other than that, yeah. Salem, USA.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the Salem from the witch trials? No,
I don't
or
know.
no
There's a
idea.
few Salems across the East
Yeah,
Coast, actually.
right.
Winston
It's like
Salem.
what's the other one that there's like Jacksonville? There seems to be like 100 of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm actually from Jacksonville, Florida, and
Wow.
there's a Jacksonville, North Carolina. I'm sure there's other ones I don't know about, but yeah.
Yeah. Because I knew a guy from Jacksonville, Florida as well. Not you, but another one. And I used to talk about him to other American friends of mine as the guy from Jacksonville, and they'd be like,
The
"Okay,
where?
you might
Which
as well have
one?
just said America. You
Yeah.
haven't honed it down by saying Jacksonville."
I think Jacksonville, Florida might be the biggest Jacksonville of them all.
Yeah.
I don't know
It's the
that for
one that
sure, though.
would it be the one that'd be most well known, maybe? Yeah.
I think so. Oh man. Let's see here. I'll take a couple more questions, then I think we'll wrap it up. Thoughts on the BMW twin cam head?
Oh, the BMW twin cam. I love them. They are not for the faint of hearted.
Mhm.
You need to be pretty dedicated to the conversion and expect it to be less than straightforward. But when
Yeah.
they're right, they're amazing. Yeah, I love them. I think they're
Mhm.
cool. And I love the
Yeah.
idea of taking a motorcycle head and putting it on your little lowly mini. That appeals to me. I like that.
Yeah. The bastardization of an A
Yeah.
series feels very
Oh,
nice.
yeah, I love it. I think, it fits right in with a mini, right? It's just in the
Uh-huh.
right bracket to me. But yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would agree. I think, but to compound on that, I would say also that your pocketbook is very deep.
Oh,
They, no matter which conversion kit you use, whether it's that CAD billet version, or I think
yeah.
specialist components maybe
Oh,
do a billet. I don't even know.
It's
None of them are cheap.
expensive.
None.
And nothing fits out of the box. And that's no slight on those conversion kits. They are what they are, but nothing will work out of the box. Please do not go that way and think you're going to literally just empty out a box full of parts, bolt them onto your mini engine, and it's all going to be, yeah, it's not going to be the case. It absolutely
Yep.
isn't. But no, they're cool. They're cool.
All right.
What else?
Why don't you pick our last question, Paul?
All righty. Last question. Let me look here. I did see one that I liked. Max, is it Lizard? Would that be correct? Any fifth gear options for the A series type engine? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The one that springs directly to mind that I have any experience with is the mini spares option. They do a really, really cool, well-engineered 5-speed conversion. Jack Knight did one as well, but they all have there's no new ones of those. So they all have a lot of miles on them. So I think the only brand new option, maybe I'm wrong, maybe KAD do one as well still. I think they did do a dogleg 5-speed gear kit as well at one stage. But yeah, for a road going A series mini, yeah, the 5-speed gear kit from or gearbox setup from Mini Spares is pretty top class, really, to be honest with you.
Yep.
I have a customer's mini which has probably the guts of 10,000 miles on it now with one of those, and it's very good. Yeah, hasn't missed a beat. So,
That's
yeah.
nice. Yeah, those
Not really a question,
something to add to the Jack Knight ones too is, from my understanding, this is not direct experience. This is anecdotal and read experience that I've learned. But my understanding is that they are not very happy with high torque and high power engines, specifically high torque engines. So the pinion supports, the gear supports inside that gearbox just are not great for it. Granted, not many gearboxes in general are happy with a lot of torque, but the Jack Knight is especially unhappy with it.
Yeah, I think there might be something with the Mini Spares one. There might actually be a caveat with that as well, of like it's designed for only like a certain horsepower or certain torque. I think I can't remember exactly, but I do think there's a caveat with their ones that says something similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for high power, you're going to be in better shape. If you're feeling like you need a fifth gear, then it might be beneficial to reduce the size of your final drive gear and create a taller final drive so that it's a little bit better in higher RPMs. You're going to lose out at the bottom end. But you'll probably find a solution there. At least I have in my experience moving to like from whatever final drive, maybe it's 3.4 or 3.1. If you really have a lot of highway driving, something like that, moving to like a 295. But again, the bottom end will suffer as a result.
Yeah, and watch those really tall final drives as well. The pinions tend to be they're off of only really, well, unless you're buying new ones. The original ones, like in what were in the MPI minis, were a little bit weedy. I don't think the materials was great in them. I've seen a few of those split. So yeah, if you're going for those real tall final drives, just watch what as I always say to people, just be careful about putting really sticky tires on a mini, because the very first fuse to blow is wheel spin, and if you get rid of wheel spin, well, something else is going to blow up the line.
Yep. You're just going to move that weakness higher and higher up to the.
Expensive. Yeah, it will be expensive. Yeah, wheel spin is very cheap. Everything else expensive.
Yep, that is a very good way to think about it.
Yeah.
All righty. Well,
okay, guys.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you again for everyone for joining this live stream. And if you guys have any questions or things after this live stream about ignition, timing, anything like that, post it on either Paul's channel or my channel. The video will be available on both.
Totally. Yeah, and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you all, everybody, for tuning in. It's great. I really enjoy chatting with you guys. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one.
See you guys.